What do you think these three tracks have in common? That's right. They're built on vintage samples that form the foundation of the entire production. And today, I'm going to make a sample in this exact style with you. We'll break down the mechanics, cover a bit of theory, and go over some tricks you might not know about. So get comfortable. Today, we're diving into the world of vintage samples. Now, before we get into making the music, let's break down 4 key components that are absolutely essential for our vintage samples. Component number 1, the harmonic element. That's the chords, melodies, and instruments we use to set the main vibe for our sample. Component number 2, the rhythmic element. Very often, this includes various bass guitars, drums, and percussion instruments. Basically, anything that can set a clear and readable rhythm. Component number 3, panning. One of the most important components in today's video. How our instruments are positioned in space relative to each other. And finally, component number 4, the character of the sound. It's really important what techniques we use to give our sample that exact sound of an old vinyl record. We don't need to use all of these components in order. We can easily combine them and apply them only where they're actually needed. In my samples, I mostly use these scale degrees. Obviously, there are way more of them, but these are my absolute favorites. And now a quick lesson for those who don't know how to understand and use these degrees. If you already know all this and don't need this info, just skip ahead to the timestamp you see on the screen. So how do you actually write a chord knowing only these degrees? To save you from having to memorize all the notes in a given key, FL Studio and many other DAWs have helpful tools. To do this, let's open the piano roll, click on this little arrow, and select the key we need from the menu. In our case, it's B minor. Now we can see all the notes available to us and the ones that aren't in our key. To figure out which degree is which, we just number all the available notes in one octave, starting with the first one, in our case, the note B. This numbering right here is our scale degrees. But what do these lowercase and uppercase letters mean? It's actually very simple. A lowercase letter is a minor chord, an uppercase letter is a major chord. That's all you need to know about degrees. Let's head over to our sample. As the main instrument for our sample, I wrote an electric guitar like this. This is a guitar from Native Instruments, and before using it, I usually open the preamp and effects section and turn off absolutely all the effects. At first it might sound really boring and plastic, but later on we'll add some processing. This sound will become more lively and vintage. For this sample, I set the key to B minor, 79 BPM, using steps 4 and 1, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. Let's write in our first chord and immediately make these chords more lively. We'll add some light finger picking, like on a real guitar. To make this guitar sound even more alive, let's add some micro pauses and vary the volume of all the notes. And let's not forget about articulations, which are available in many libraries. They can play a huge role. For the second chord, we'll just copy our first chord and drop it down to the root note. Let's tweak it a bit to give our sequence a sense of closure. Also, to add even more variety to our notes and make them sound more alive, let's press Alt-R and change their velocity. You can toggle the C to choose the pattern you like best. Let's hear how it sounds. Right now it sounds pretty boring and plastic, and it's time to apply our fourth component. That's the sound character. To do this, let's add a delay and pan the repeats to the right ear. Also, let's lower the volume a bit. To add an interesting character and more harmonics to our guitar, we'll use waterfall rotary. Let's switch the mode to fast and change the mix to 30%. That should be enough. Also, let's apply our third component. That's panning. For this, I usually use Altiverb, and my favorite room is bedroom 1. Let's turn down the mix a bit and turn up the volume to compensate, and pan our guitar slightly to the left ear to make room for all the other instruments we'll be using. Now for the most interesting part. It's time to add that vintage character to our guitar sound. For this, I'll be using my plugin called Warm Tone. Here we'll turn down the magnetic a bit, add some deform, a bit of bias, and make the noise slightly quieter. Also, let's cut out the frequencies we don't need right away. The next instrument we add should logically support our harmony and play along with our guitar. I decided to add two instruments at once. That's an upright piano and an electric piano. Actually, I didn't come up with anything new here. They just repeat our chords, and I made very minor changes. I made the piano a little bit louder, right where the chord changes, just to emphasize that shift in mood. This is a pretty common trick in old music. We'll pan the electric piano to the right ear to close up our stereo image along with the guitar. As for the upright piano, it had way too much room sound and stereo width, so we'll bring it a bit closer to mono. Also, let's not forget to apply our fourth component to these instruments as well. To do this, let's add a standard compressor and heavily squash our sound to recreate the so-called volume limit. The thing is, many old cassettes, when receiving a loud input signal, would hit the ceiling of maximum volume, or as it's also called, the magnetization limit, which caused the output signal to have a heavy compression effect. And to finish our chain, we'll use the Warm Tone plugin. Let's completely remove its noise and turn down magnetic and deform. Let's listen to everything together with the guitar. Let's temporarily set aside the harmonic part of our sample, and it's time to work on a clearer and more readable rhythm. For the bass guitar, I used probably one of the most famous libraries from Native Instruments. I'm sure you've seen this guitar many times. To start, let's write the bass notes based on the root notes of our chords. Now let's diversify them a bit. Also, let's rhythmically highlight the area where our chords change and drop it all down one octave. It's very important that our guitar and drums sound as if they are in the same space. To do this, we'll use Valhalla Vintage Verb. Let's choose the drum air preset and set the mix to about 20%. Also, for the bass guitar, we'll cut out all the unnecessary frequencies. Let's listen to everything together. Before we move on to mastering our sample, I decided to add some final elements that will make our sample sound more complete and finished. For this, I wrote these violins and a choir. These are Session Strings Pro 2 violins playing chords in the background, and a brighter Joshua Bell violin playing a new motif on the high notes. As you can see, the first violins just repeat our chords, and I only removed the third and added it at the transition to the next chord, raising it an octave up to draw attention to it. But as we know, one of the main features of live violins is how dynamic they can sound. But how do we apply this feature to our violins? To do this, let's click on this little arrow and open the volume envelope. Here we'll draw how the volume dynamics of our violins will change as they play. As for the second brighter violin, I wrote it along the top notes of our chords and raised it an octave up. For processing, I'll only use Chow Tape Model, which is a completely free plugin, and an EQ. To create a live dynamic choir, I used a library from East West. They also just repeat our chords. And now for the final step, mastering our sample. And here's a very important point. If our goal is to recreate a genuine old record effect, we need to treat this composition like a full song or instrumental piece and take its sound very seriously. People who wrote many of those old songs never thought some producer would come along and sample them. They were making their own music, and how it sounded after mastering was the final form of that sound. First, in our mastering chain, it makes sense to use any soft tape emulator to set the character we want right away. Very often I choose Virtual Tape Machine. I really like how it sounds, but you can use any other emulator to your taste. Let's slow down the tape speed to 15 IPS. This will add that classic magnetic saturation, and the sound will get a bit warmer and thicker. Also, let's increase the input volume a bit. Now let's move on to compression. We don't want to compress our sound too much. To do this, let's reduce the mix to about 10 to 15% and slightly cut the mids and lows. And then it's time for the final EQ and the volume of our sample. And now our sample is ready. But before we move on to the final listen, I'd like to thank each and every one of you who watched this video to the end. I put a lot of time and effort into this project, and I'd be really glad if you'd subscribe, leave a like, and a comment under this video. See ya!